All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is Jay again, and it is starting to get hot here in Phoenix, Arizona. We are starting to hit our higher temperatures here. We are starting to get into the high 90s, 100s, as we will be coming this weekend. So I thought I would do this video real quick today, since it seems to be a perfect day for this subject. And today's video is going to be how and why you guys kill your tropical trees here. And really, it's not your fault, guys. A lot of it has to do with the weather and the environment that we live in. We struggle here. We live in the desert, so you have basically everything trying to kill your fruit tree when you live in the desert, okay? It is hot, it is dry, and it is windy. And when you start combining all those factors together, guys, it almost basically acts like a giant brick oven here in the valley. It's going to be hot, dry, and windy basically for the rest of the summer. And so what this does is this starts to dry out and evaporate. I've got a little hummingbird. It starts to dry out and evaporate your plants. And if you're not watering them extra during this season and the hot season, well, then you'll start to see some decline on your plants. You'll see them start to turn a yellowish color because they're getting sun bleached. So if you see a lot of your plants this time of the year starting to turn a different color green or even a light yellow, well, just know that that has to do with the heat that's coming on. Okay, it's not a nutrient deficiency on your plants. And in fact, once we start to cool down again, all of these trees will start to green up and start to get that really dark green again. Okay, so you've got several factors that are working against your plants that are very strong. Because remember, a lot of the fruit trees that are out here in the open, these are the stronger trees. These are the ones that have to make it through the full sun and the wind and the heat, and they're sitting in pots and they're sitting on concrete. Okay, so you've got all these factors that are kind of weighing in and kind of beating up these fruit trees over the summertime. So you have to make sure you really keep extra irrigation to them so that they hold a lot of their fruit during these drier, hotter seasons. Okay, so why did I pick today as an example of a good way to save your tropical trees here real soon, or what is happening to them? And a lot of that is this wind. So you see this wind that we're getting today, this really dries up a lot of your tropical trees because they don't live in an environment where it is super windy like this, and especially dry. So what it ends up doing is it ends up drying up the fruit trees, and especially, like I said, your tropicals. These fruit trees that are out here, you've got things like mulberries and figs and peaches. If you feel the textures of these leaves, these are very, very hard and rough and hardy. Like a lot of these actually end up feeling like sandpaper by the end of the summer, especially the fig trees. They get really, really rough. They almost feel like a piece of cardboard by the end of the summer because they have toughened up that leaf so that they don't lose so much water to the environment, right? You want plants to take in water from the environment. Well, it's really, really dry here, guys. It's like 7% humidity. And when you've got something like that going on, you've got plants that are actually losing water to the atmosphere. They're not taking in. So a really good example is this mulberry leaf right here. You can kind of see that he's kind of shrunken up a little bit, and the edges are starting to kind of fold in a little bit, which means he's going to start to kind of conserve some of his water and shrink up a little bit as they grow. A lot of these bigger leaves are from the spring. They're really, really happy in the spring, so they tend to put on a lot of these really big leaves in the spring. But when summer comes, it tends to burn a lot of these bigger leaves. So the plants will start to adapt, and they'll start to put on smaller leaves that are a different color and a different shape and a different hardiness, because it knows that it can't sustain these big old leaves through the summer because it's going to lose too much water to atmosphere. So don't be surprised to see a lot of your older spring leaves starting to kind of curl up and burn a little bit as the tree grows, because you've got the spring leaves And then you've got the summer leaves, which are going to be a lot smaller. And then you've got the fall leaves, which are going to come, which are going to be big, just like these. And then they're going to go leafless, and they're going to start that whole cycle over again. Okay, and so that's just the trees that are very, very strong, right? So they're starting to get a little bit beat up out here. They've got the sun beating against them. They've got the wind beating against them. No humidity, and it just gets hot. So you'll see the behavior start to change on a lot of your fruit trees about this time of the year. A lot of their leaves are going to start to change shape and color as they adapt to the oncoming heat. But don't worry about it, guys, because they will green back up once it cools down. You can see that a mulberry sitting up here that's getting a little bit more shade because I've got the house and the greenhouse here. You can see that it is that nice dark green that you're looking for all year long. But you're not going to get that when you've got the plants out in the sun like this. They're going to be a different color. They're going to be what we call Arizona green, which is more like this lime green, somewhat yellow. And so it's called solar bleaching, guys. It has to do with the amount of hours that they're out in the sunlight. And when they're smaller trees, they don't adapt as well, okay? So you can see a lot of the plants that are out here are kind of yellowish, and then as we get closer to the house, they get darker and darker green because you've got the coolness from the house that's giving these shade a little bit earlier than the other ones get. So everything up here, of course, is a nice dark green. So that's the first thing I want you guys to observe. Is that happening? Right? So don't freak out if you see your plants start to turn these colors through the summertime, and then they will go back to these colors as we start to cool back down again. Or plants that are in the shade, of course, are going to be this darker green, have bigger leaves, and not quite so much wind damage, okay? You can see these figs over here. Man, just huge leaves. Perfect leaves on all these figs. I can't even really show you them because they've all gotten really, really big. Oh man, look at that fig. Look at the size of that thing, guys. Beautiful figs. So a lot of them getting this large is the fact that these fig trees are up here where it's a little bit cooler, right? As you get further out into the figs where it's still sunny, you're going to see them kind of drooping down and kind of melting out here. But as these start to get shade, of course, they will all perk up. Wow, they actually look pretty good. So bad example. But anyway, the trees are sitting in the shade and they're growing out here. Growing out here into the sun. Okay. So how does this pertain to tropical trees? Okay. Well, they grow very slowly. Tropical trees grow very slowly. And when they grow, their new growth is a lot different than the new growth on a lot of these plants that can be outside. So let's go in here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so these are all Shangri-La mulberries. In here, these are a tropical tree, Florida tropical tree. So you're going to get a lot of growth and the huge leaves in here where it's a lot cooler, and these things can thrive away from that wind beating on them from growing. So I kind of get them started in here, and then as these get bigger, I will take these out and I will acclimate them to the outside, which is basically wind and humidity and temperature. So they need to adjust to those three things, right, before these can be sold. Now, you'll see that it's not as bad or sensitive on some of these mulberries, but let's go over and look at some of the actual tropical trees. I'm going to show you how sensitive their new little growth is. And if you kind of take a look at how they grow, you will see that if these plants were out in the wind and the heat when they're actively growing, which is right now, Remember, tropical trees, they have a very, they only grow for just a few events during the year. Like mangoes here, you'll get 3 little growth periods per year, okay? Now let's say you've got wind and heat and it's dry and it's beating these plants up then. Well, it's gonna beat up all that new little growth, okay? Now look how sensitive this is. This basically, guys, this, if you breathe on this, this will tear, okay? And also, if there's wind beating on it, it won't come out as a nice, perfect leaf. It's gonna be a really, really beat up and scarred and distorted leaves. So a lot of these tropical plants seem to grow literally during the worst times of the year when it's really, 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 really windy outside. And it tends to beat up and dry or even break off all of these new little leaves and growth. So basically they just never grow, right? Because you've got that very small little window. Let's look over here at the Suriname cherries. Like, look how sensitive that new little growth is. So if this was out there getting beat up today, well then it wouldn't even be there. It would actually just be a terminal end. This would just have an end and then nothing else. It wouldn't be actually actively growing, right? So since tropical trees have a very short growing window to begin with, then if you're missing that growth that you're trying to get during those seasons because the tree is getting beat up, I mean, if it went out there, guys, these Suriname cherries would be all over the ground, right? All over the ground, because there's no wind blockades, not very many here. So it would knock all the cherries to the ground. You'd never get any fruit, and this new growth would absolutely be destroyed if they were out in that today. Okay, now let's look at another couple examples while we're right here. Avocados, that's the one that you all like to grow. Look how sensitive this growth is. Guys, this should literally, like, I feel like this should be like in the house. Like, this new growth is so sensitive and so green and so pretty that this would absolutely be destroyed out there. Not to mention the avocados would probably be all over the ground too. It'd probably knock those all over the ground, and then you'd never have avocados, right? Let's look at another example. Here's some chocolate pudding fruit or black sapote. Well, these happen to fruit really good outside of here, but in here you've even got fruit on these very young plants, and of course you've got this really, really sensitive growth. So it's about the sensitive growth on the tropical trees, guys. That's why it is very difficult to get them to grow outside here in Phoenix, because those type of plants, it's very sensitive growth, and this will get torn or this will get sun bleached and burnt, and then you will not have some of these more sensitive plants. Cherry of the Rio Grande's that way. Jabaticaba's that way. They've just got very, very, very sensitive new growth. So of course, like I said, if that was out today in the hurricane we're basically having, let's go over here to this wax apple. You see, this thing is just covered in blooms. Absolutely covered. Fruit everywhere on this thing. Really, really pretty flowers. But never seen so much fruit, right? Because this is a tropical tree. So I've got these also planted outside, but they have nowhere near the fruit on them that these have, and the growth outside, of course, is just beat silly, while as in here it really looks good. I mean, look at this red Suriname sitting right next to it. Beautiful, 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 but sensitive. Sensitive. And probably the biggest culprit of them all is starfruit, guys. Starfruit hate the wind. They absolutely hate it. They absolutely hate it. So they've got this very fine little leaves, very sensitive growth, very small. Look at this, right? Very sensitive small flowers. So the biggest culprit is going to be the starfruit trees. The starfruit trees, they really dry up out here, so you got to keep them extra irrigated, and you want to give them some nice cover, kind of like the sun that you see that they're getting here. Not full sun, not full shade. Most tropical trees like this environment right here, guys. If you can copy this, you'll have good luck with these. Now you'd ask, well, then why aren't these starfruit in the greenhouse if they have such sensitive growth? Why aren't they in there? Because of the wind. And their answer to that is starfruit will not grow in that greenhouse because they don't like the humidity levels that are in there. So you would think that they would, but this is a tree that needs more sunlight and air, not wind, air and light, to keep him nice and healthy and keep him from getting any kind of fungal diseases. So these guys need to be out in the air, unfortunately, and there's nothing you can do other than sort of provide a good little environment around them that sort of keeps them happy. Okay, now it's not all tropical trees that have this problem. The main two are the two that you saw in the greenhouse, the ones everybody wants, and that's the mangoes and the avocados, because those two, that new sensitive growth is sort of critical, right? Now you've got things like guava. A guava can handle it because you're giving it extra irrigation, and they grow really, really fast. These grow like a weed, so it doesn't tend to go through those same effects that the slow growing avocados and the mangoes have a tendency to do. So that's what's happening, guys. You're just losing the new growth. The tree never grows. It starts to die. It dies back further. It dies back further. It never fruits. It dies back further. And then a bunch of dead trees at the end of the summer. So I was trying to get in here and save some of your plants and kind of tell you guys that some are more sensitive than others. Here's a champion. Champion is the ice cream bean, because this thing grows all the time. It doesn't matter if it's doesn't matter if it's windy or hot or cold. I've found this ice cream bean to be sort of a weed, and when you get tropical trees that are weeds, you hang on to those, right? And the Barbados, they don't seem to be so affected by wind either. They are more of a bulletproof full sun plant also. So there are definitely guys, there are some tropical trees that work better than others, and some are easier than others. More or less the point of this video was to try to save you guys on some of these new plantings that you're doing and these new tropical trees you're putting in, and to try to save your plants and know which ones to do and know what's happening when you see it happening, and know that you got to give most of these trees this speckled environment. They don't like that. They don't like being out there in the full sun. You've got plants that do, you know, like your figs, beautiful figs. These like being in the full sun and have to be in the full sun. But when it comes to your tropicals, that is not the situation. You would like them to be a little bit cooler, less wind, right? And humidity picked up just a little bit depending on what that plant is. All right, guys, that is it for today. Thank you for watching the video, and please subscribe and make sure you protect those plants during the summer. And know that this is the time period that I actually plant these plants, because they grow actively right now. So I'm dropping a bunch of these in the ground, but I'm not putting them in out there, guys. I'm not planting them in full sun. I'm planting them in people's yards and my own yards that already have a sort of little established area that they can put some of these more sensitive plants in, or start to get to their tropical trees, because tropical trees are slow growing, guys. And if you eventually want things like mangoes, well, then you're going to have to protect them so they get bigger, right? That is what's happening, is these things are burning up, right? So you got to get some of these plants in there to help them. I mean, these curry are just killing it out here. And it's full sun, hot, no water. So establish some plants like these guys first. guys, before you start to put in some of the more sensitive tropicals, but eventually you can get to them. All right, guys, that is it for today. Please subscribe, leave a little thumbs up there, and I will bring you more content from this, and I'm hoping this at least saves one fruit tree this summer for somebody. Thank you for watching.